Rolling into another Sweet 16, we have to ask the question, is Nate Oats the new GOAT of Alabama basketball? We explore next on Scarbo Knows. Here comes Alabama. When I say rolling into another Sweet 16, I mean rolling. How about Alabama 90, Texas Tech 65? For a while there, Alabama was threatening the record of the largest margin of victory by a 4 seed over a 5 seed in NCAA tournament history. They didn't quite get there. Sorry, Auburn. Auburn has the largest loss in that spot as a 5 seed against 4 seed Clemson back in 2018. Leave it to Alabama to not do Auburn any favors. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Skarbinski, a.k.a. Scarbo. This is Scarbo Knows. Appreciate you joining us on the Sidelines.live network with executive producer extraordinaire Brendan Martin at the wheel. Appreciate Brendan as always. Appreciate you watching and listening. And if you are watching at some point on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and check out all the great shows on the Sidelines.live network. And make sure you check out our sponsor, Money Management Services. They've been in business since 1992 in Birmingham. Great friends of mine. They'll take excellent care of you. We'll hear from them later in the show. So let's get into it here on the Monday after the first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament. We are down to 16 teams, 4 of them from the SEC, one of them no stranger to this spot, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. They had to wait a long time to tip off, I think, about 9:09 Central Time on Sunday night, 10:09 Eastern Time. That's ridiculous. Come on, guys. We got to work on the schedule a little bit. But it didn't bother Alabama. Apparently, they have a lot of night owls on their roster. They jumped on Texas Tech from the start. And to be fair, the Red Raiders don't have their best player, JT Toppin. He got hurt late in the regular season, was out for the year. So they're not the same team without him, but they still have a large collection of talent, and it did not matter. Alabama played with a level of energy and attitude and enthusiasm and effort in that game that I don't know that we've seen all year long. Now, you could say to yourself, well, what was behind that? Why did they play better defense than we've seen from an Alabama team in some time? I suggested, or I asked on Twitter during the game, when's the last time we saw Alabama play defense like this? Was it the 2012 or the 1993 Sugar Bowl? That's how good they were on that end of the floor, which is not where they make their hay. It's usually on the other end. And, of course, they made the Nets dance on offense as well. 19 three-pointers, 19 of 42 from beyond the arc. And if Alabama shoots like that, I don't care who they play. Are you listening, Michigan? That's who's up next in the Sweet 16, but we're going to get into that matchup later in the show. But even after that dominant performance, even without Aiden Holloway, their second leading scorer, who is back at home, was back at home in Tuscaloosa, awaiting a hearing before the Office of Student Conduct and to see how his legal case plays out. Of course, he was popped for marijuana possession at his residence a week or so ago. I guess it was exactly a week ago. They didn't miss him. In fact, you have to wonder if they don't have a little extra motivation now. If you watch the game, you saw a lot of this from Alabama players. They were not flashing the peace sign. They were showing love to number 2, their teammate. They call him Biz, short for Showbiz, Aiden Holloway. So they have a lot of love for their missing teammate. But dare I say, especially on one end of the floor, they're a better basketball team without him. On defense, Aiden Holloway is a liability. They had no holes on defense against Texas Tech. So we'll see how things play out. I don't know if there's any chance legally or academically from the university's perspective that Aiden Holloway could play this weekend in the Sweet 16. I would highly suggest that for him, first of all, as a person, And for Alabama as a team, that they're better off if he deals with his issues and does not rejoin the team this season. And we'll see how that goes. Of course, these things can change any minute. We'll keep an eye on that through the rest of the week. But you would think that at this point, after what Alabama's accomplished under Nate Oats, after what we saw from them in the first two rounds, Hofstra gave them more of a fight in the first round than Texas Tech did in the second. The score got out of hand late in the game, but it was a 5-point game with 5 minutes and change left. And then Alabama asserted its will down the stretch. But a couple of double-digit victories for Nate Oats and the Crimson Tide. And despite that, everybody likes to re-rank the Sweet 16 when we get to this point in the tournament. Who has the best chance to emerge as the national champion? And I have to disagree with my good friend Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News. Known Mike a long time, have the ultimate respect for him as a person and as a basketball mind, as a basketball writer, a basketball journalist. He listed the 16 teams remaining in the tournament on chances to win it all, and he has Alabama down there at number 15, just ahead of Texas. I saw another re-ranking of the Sweet 16 that has Alabama number 11. The only one I saw that gave Alabama any real love came from, surprise, surprise, former Alabama coach Avery Johnson, who is now a CBS Sports analyst. He wrote a piece for CBSSports.com in which he suggested that if you re-rank the teams in his mind, Alabama would be number 6, right behind number 5, Michigan. Food for thought. I guess Avery wants to be invited back to reunions in the future in Tuscaloosa. But that's pretty high praise. For the most part, though, most people think this is where the road ends for Alabama in the Sweet 16 against Michigan. That's what I had in my original bracket. I had them meeting the Wolverines and the Wolverines moving on. But there's something about this team. And we're going to get to the man who runs the show in a minute. But this is a team, and they have that little intangible called chemistry, togetherness. Guys that play for each other. Guys that enjoy each other's success as much as they enjoy their own. There's a word for that in Tuscaloosa. Their softball coach came up with it, and he has used it with his teams for a long, long time. He's been incredibly successful there. Pat Murphy. Mudita, M-U-D-I-T-A. And that means just what I described, that you care as much about the team's success and your teammates' success as your own, or maybe even more so. And if you watch this Alabama team play, watch the smile on Latrell Reitzel's face. He's the point guard. He did an unbelievable job defensively on Christian Anderson, the Texas Tech star, in that second-round victory. I wish and my hope for you is that we all enjoy whatever it is that we do as much as Latrell Reitzel Jr. enjoys playing basketball for the University of Alabama. He's been through a lot of adversity there. He has come back from a torn Achilles. This is his last year of college basketball, and he looks like he wants to go out with a bang. And then there's Houston Millett, who wears number 95 because, as in his words, 95% of the time, I'll get it right, 95% of the time you play basketball, you play without the ball in your hands. So what do you contribute to the team during the majority of your time on the floor? And he is a Tasmanian devil. He's attacking the offensive glass. He is D'ing up. He's grabbing rebounds. He's on the floor for loose balls. And then if he's open, don't leave him open because he will knock down threes. He and Reitzel combined for 11, I think, in that Texas Tech win. So there's something special about this team. And as Millett said after the game last night, I will die for this school. I love this place. And trust me when I say, knowing what I know about that program, knowing what I know about those players, that is not hype. That is not empty rhetoric. That is from the heart. That's why I say there's something special about this team. Now, it all starts at the top. It starts with the head coach. And if you didn't know it by now, Nate Oats is one of the elite coaches in college basketball. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the numbers. The Sweet 16 is an accomplishment. For very few teams is the season disappointing if you get to the second weekend. Very, very few. Look at what Nate Oats and Alabama have done since 2021. First of all, look at the coaches and the number of victories. At the top of the list, of course, Kelvin Sampson in Houston, 18 NCAA tournament victories since 2021, followed by Dan Hurley and UConn. Of course, they went back-to-back in national championships in 23 and 24. He's got 15 wins in that time in the tournament. Mark Few, Gonzaga, we know what he's accomplished, 14 wins. And coming in at number 4 in the country, ahead of the likes of Tom Izzo and Bill Self and John Calipari and so many other big names, is Nate Oats from Alabama. He has won 13 NCAA tournament games in 6 years and counting with the Crimson Tide. That is elite. Now, that's just total victories. But obviously, if you win that many NCAA tournament games, you're advancing into the bracket. Let's look at Sweet 16s, which is, to me, if you are a national program, if you're an elite program, your daily, annual, or annual minimum requirement should be the second weekend, the Sweet 16. Look at who has led their teams to the most Sweet 16s since 2021. And the reason I start with 2021 is because Nate Oats' first year in Alabama was 2019-2020. There was no tournament that year because of COVID. Now, Alabama wouldn't have been there. They went 16 and 15, but they have been elite since. So since 2021, Kelvin Sampson and Houston have been to 6 Sweet 16s. That's all there have been. That's 6 in a row. Nate Oats and Alabama come in next at 5. 5 of the last 6 years, they have played on the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And as you can see, that's more than anyone else in the SEC and more than anyone else in the country except for Houston. Rick Barnes at Tennessee has been to 4. Matt Painter in Purdue have been to 4. Tommy Lloyd in Arizona have been to 4. All of those teams and all of those coaches are in the Sweet 16 again this year. That is elite company. How about getting to the Sweet 16 in consecutive seasons? Not just having a flash in the pan, not just, I don't know, getting knocked out in the first round one year, winning a national championship the next, then getting knocked out in the second round as a number 1 seed the next year, looking at Utah, Golden, and Florida. Consecutive Sweet 16s. Kelvin Sampson leads the nation. He's been to 7 straight. You go back to 2019, before the 2020 tournament was canceled. The Cougars have been to 7 consecutive Sweet 16s. Up next for consecutive trips to the regional semifinals, Nate Oats and Alabama, and Rick Barnes in Tennessee with 4 in a row. That is not a mistake. That is not a happy accident. It's because those are elite coaches. Now, having said all of that, having put all these numbers out there, having compared Oats, comparing him favorably to the best coaches in the country, we have to turn our attention to the best coach in Alabama history. And for a long time, that has been Wimp Sanderson. If you're not familiar with the legend of Wimp Sanderson, if you don't go back to the 1980s, let me just give you an annotated biography of the man known as Wimp. He spent 20 years as an Alabama assistant, many of them under C.M. Newton, who was a pretty fair country basketball coach himself. And then when CM moved on, Bear Bryant himself elevated Wimp Sanderson to head coach. Now, most people didn't know who he was. They didn't know much about him. He was kind of funny looking. He had an expression on his face, very demonstrative in his facial expressions. He had a scowl that would melt paint. And Bear gave him a chance, and one of the smartest hires that Bear Bryant ever made. All Wimp did in 12 years was win 5 SEC tournament championships, went to 6 Sweet 16s, but couldn't get past that round. He came so close so many times, had heartbreaking losses to Loyola Marymount when they were scoring 100 points plus. They were the Nate Oats Alabama of their day back in the late 80s, early 90s. Wimp lost to them in the Sweet 16. He lost to Providence and Rick Pitino with Billy Donovan shooting the lights out in the Sweet 16. But Wimp was going to get you to the Sweet 16. Again, 6 out of 12 years. That's outstanding. Let's compare Nate Oats and Wimp Sanderson. Wimp won 12 NCAA tournament games in his 12 years as the Alabama head coach. Nate Oats has won 13 games in March Madness in 7 years, and he may not be done. Sweet 16s, Wimp again got to 6 in 12 years. Oats, 5 in 6 years. 25-win seasons, Alabama earned its 25th victory of this season last night against Texas Tech. That's the 4th time under Nate Oats that Alabama has won 25 or more games. They did it 3 times under Wimp Sanderson. All of those accomplishments by Nate Oats and company are school records. And if you break a record held by Alabama basketball from the Wimp Sanderson era, you have done something special. And that's what Nate Oats has done. It doesn't matter whether you like him or not, whether you like it or not, he just wins. And he does it in a way that is unique. With his offensive style, they lead the country in scoring, 91 points a game. They're going to fire up threes after threes after threes, and they're going to make a lot of them. They're going to push the pace. They're going to make you play faster than you want to play most of the time, and that style is going to win. And let's put this in perspective in another way. And I know Big Ten fans are celebrating today. They're throwing parades like the St. Patrick's Day parade and Ferris Bueller's Day Off because they have 6 teams in the Sweet 16. Meanwhile, the SEC has 4. Thanks again, Todd Golden in Florida. If Florida hadn't played perhaps the worst end game sequence, the worst final 9 seconds imaginable, they would be back in the Sweet 16. The SEC would have 5, and the Big Ten would have 5. But that's not the point of this perspective. Here is the point. This is the best the SEC has ever been. Part of that is volume because there are 16 teams, and Oklahoma has a quality basketball program. Texas has a quality basketball program. The Longhorns played in the first 4. They won more NCAA tournament games than anyone this year because they were in the first 4. They're 3-0, and they're in the Sweet 16 as an 11 seed under Sean Miller his first year in Austin. That's just one example of how competitive the SEC has become. Here's another one. A year ago, the SEC set the record for teams invited to the NCAA tournament with 14. 14 of the 16 teams in the conference participated in the big dance last year. Overall, they won 23 games. They put 7 teams in the Sweet 16. That was a record. They put 4 teams in the Elite 8. That tied a record. They put 2 in the Final 4, 1 in the national championship game, and Todd Golden in Florida got it done and won another big ring and took it home to Gainesville. And if that weren't enough, what did the SEC do for an encore this year? As everyone said, the league's not as good as it's been. It doesn't have the same number of elite teams as it did, which may turn out to be accurate. They still sent 10 teams into this NCAA tournament. And those 10 teams so far have combined to win 13 games. The SEC is 13-6 through 2 rounds of the tournament. The Big Ten is 13-3. Not too shabby. So in the last 2 years, the SEC has won 36 NCAA tournament games. 1 conference, 36 NCAA wins. And I say all that to remind you that Nate Oats is doing what he's doing while the SEC is deeper and more competitive than ever. And I'll add one more nugget to this discussion. Right now, of course, last year, 23 wins. That's the national record for any conference in a single NCAA tournament. Number 2 in SEC history is 1996, when Kentucky and Mississippi State got to the Final Four. Kentucky won it all with Mark Pope in uniform, and they went 14-3 in the tournament. The SEC did. That's number 2 all time. Number 3 all time in wins by the SEC collectively in one big dance is this year with 13 after 2 rounds. So they have an opportunity to move into second place at least, and if everything went right, challenge last year's national record of 23. Of course, the Big Ten has that same chance. But here's something to keep an eye on. So right now, these are the 3 most successful years in the postseason in the NCAA tournament in SEC history: 2025, 2026, and 1996. You know what 2025 and 1996 have in common? Each year, the SEC sent 2 teams to the Final Four. Last year, of course, it was Florida and Auburn. In 1996, it was Kentucky and Mississippi State. Both years, an SEC team won the national title. Florida last year, Kentucky in 96. Is that an omen? Are we going to see 2 more SEC teams in the Final Four? Is one of them going to win it all? No one is expecting that since Florida got knocked out by Iowa in Tampa. Iowa, the 9th place team in the Big Ten. What are we even doing? So I'm not saying, I'm just saying keep an eye on that. And here's something else to keep an eye on. All right, let's talk for a minute about Alabama versus Michigan. First of all, there's a fun backstory there, a side story, if you will. And I have talked for, 40 years now about Alabama's unwillingness to play UAB. They'll play UAB in baseball. They'll play them in softball. They'll play them in other sports. They will not play them in football. It's never happened. They will not play them in men's basketball. That's happened once in 1993 in the NIT, the year after Wimp Sanderson moved on. Poor David Hobbs, Wimp's top assistant, just a good dude, a good basketball coach. Actually had a couple of really good years in Tuscaloosa. But his first year, they didn't get to the NCAA tournament. They got an NIT bid, and they were matched up with UAB in Coleman Coliseum in Tuscaloosa. And, of course, Gene Bartow and company prevailed. To this day, you can find bumper stickers around Birmingham that say 58-56, which was the final score of that game, UAB winning, or UAB 1, Alabama 0. That's the series record. They didn't play before. They haven't played since. That's my only argument with Nate Oats in his scheduling approach. I think he schedules as well as anybody in the country. They consistently have the number 1 or 2 or 3 schedule of anyone in the country in terms of strength of schedule. They will play anyone at any time, anywhere, except UAB. So the closest thing we're going to see to a sequel to the one and only Alabama UAB game is going to happen Friday night in Chicago, because Michigan has some UAB ties. Their head coach, Dusty May, he was an assistant coach at UAB for a couple of years under Mike Davis. And Mike is a former Alabama player way back in the day. Who is Michigan's best player? Yaxel Lendeborg. Where did he play the last 2 years before he went to Ann Arbor? At UAB, where he was one of the better players in the American Conference, where he helped UAB win the American Conference tournament championship 2 years ago. So you've got one of the best players in UAB history, who is now one of the best players in Michigan history. He's a first-team All-American, Big Ten Player of the Year, and just a joy to be around. Fun to watch play the game, a joy to be around. He was fantastic his 2 years here in Birmingham for UAB, and now he gets a chance to do what a lot of UAB coaches and players would have loved to have had the chance to do over the years, but never were afforded the opportunity to do, and that's beat Alabama in the NCAA tournament. So that adds a little extra spice to Friday night's game. But that aside, speaking from a basketball perspective, how does Alabama beat a Michigan team that is 33-3, only 3 losses all year long? So I looked at the 3 losses, which is only natural, right? Who beat the Wolverines? How did they do it? What game plan did they employ? What kind of roster did they have? Well, those 3 losses, there was one in January, one in February, and one in March. They lost to Wisconsin at home, actually, 91-88. What did Wisconsin do? They made 15 of 33 3-point shots. Ding, ding, ding. You know Nate Oats' eyes lit up when he saw that box score and when he started digging into the tape. And then Michigan lost to Duke in February in that neutral site game in Washington, D.C., more of a defensive struggle. Duke won at 68-63. Threes were not a big factor in that game. Duke was 6 of 19. But, of course, Duke has a pretty powerful front line led by Cameron Boozer, one of the better players in the country. Interestingly, in that game, though, is of the 25 field goals that Duke made, 17 of them they assisted on. That means ball movement, player movement, something that when Alabama is clicking on offense, it is very, very good at. And going back to that Wisconsin game, 16 of their 29 field goals included assists. So there's a little bit of a pattern there. And then the third game that Michigan lost in the Big Ten championship game against a very good Purdue team, 80-72. This is kind of an outlier. Purdue was only 4 of 14 from the three-point line in that game. However, of the 30 field goals that Purdue made, the Boilermakers assisted on 21 of them, which you would expect because Braden Smith, their senior leader at point guard, is now the all-time career leader in assists in college basketball history. So you know Purdue moves the ball. You know they share the ball. You know they're willing to pass up a good shot to give a teammate a better shot. And when Alabama's at its best, as it was on Friday night against Texas Tech, that's exactly what they do. There's a sequence in that game where LeBaron Philon drives the lane. He draws the defense. He makes a one-handed, left-handed pass to the corner. I think it was to London Jemison. London could have taken a three. But as a defender ran at him, he quickly advanced the ball to the wing to Latrell Wrightsell, who had a better look, an uncontested three. And if your life was on the line and you wanted someone to shoot an uncontested three to get you another day on this planet, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better person to take that shot than Latrell Wrightsell Jr. So, of course, that is Alabama's formula to beat Michigan. Listen to these numbers. Two of the three greatest three-point performances in NCAA history were authored by Alabama under Nate Oats in the last 2 years. You guys remember the Sweet 16 last year against BYU? I'm sure BYU has tried to forget. When led by Mark Sears, Alabama made, this sounds comical, this doesn't sound real, 25 of 51 from the three-point line. Alabama took 66 shots in that game, 51 of them from beyond the arc, and they made 25. That's the NCAA tournament record for most makes in a single game. And then what they do Sunday night? Again, 19 for 42. They only hit 45% of those last night. So they took 68 shots, 42 of them from the three-point line. That's how Alabama wins. If they have an average night shooting the three, if they take the average number of threes they take per game, they lead the country in that category, and they shoot the normal percentage that they shoot, they'll make, about 11 or 12 threes. That's probably not going to be enough. They're probably going to need an elite shooting performance because Michigan likes to get up and down itself. It has a variety of scoring options led by Yaxel Lendeborg. But here could be the difference. If you're looking for a way to Alabama can win this game, if you are an Alabama fan and you're trying to muster up some confidence, some belief that this run is not going to end Friday night, that you can shock the world, maybe not on the order of Iowa beating Florida in Tampa, but you can become the darlings of this tournament, more so than young Mr. Darling for St. John's, who made his only field goal of the game Sunday on a driving layup with no time left to beat Kansas. The way that happens is you make threes. You take a lot of threes, and you make a lot of threes. And you beat a Michigan team that, as good as it has been all year long, as deep as it is, as tall as it is, with Ade Mara, the 7-footer, with Morez Johnson, another monster in the paint, with Lendeborg, who plays inside and outside. Michigan's not great on the perimeter. They're not elite at the guard spot, and they're especially not elite at the point guard spot. Now, Elliot Cadeau's been really good, okay? Don't get me wrong. The North Carolina transfer has had an outstanding season. He's not a great shooter. He's more of a distributor. His backup, LJ Kason, is out for the year. So they're a little thin at the most important position on the floor. And who mans that position for Alabama? One of the better point guards in the country. A third-team All-American, first-team All-SEC, LeBaron Philon. And as good as Alabama was on Sunday night, LeBaron Philon didn't play his best game. They didn't need him to. They still won by 25 against a solid Texas Tech team. So you don't expect LeBaron Philon to have two, by his standards, mid-games in a row. And Alabama's guards are better than Michigan's guards. They have the ability to light up the United Center. And here's something that people have overlooked about this Alabama team, that the people that, like my friend Mike DeCourcy, they're not giving Alabama much respect in this Sweet 16. Look at their schedule. Again, this is what Nate Oats does. He schedules as tough as anybody in the country for this very purpose. If you look at the teams in the Sweet 16, Alabama has played 8 games against the field. Overall, they're 4-4. But drill down a little deeper. In road games and neutral site games, Alabama has played 4 games against this Sweet 16. They've won 3 of them. They beat St. John's in Madison Square Garden. They beat Tennessee in Knoxville. And this one is most interesting of all. They beat Illinois, again, another Sweet 16 team, in Chicago in the United Center. Where is Alabama playing Michigan on Friday night? In Chicago in the United Center. Food for thought. You think Nate Oats knows what he's doing? You think maybe he had an eye on the NCAA tournament sites when he scheduled that game? Maybe that's giving him too much credit. I haven't asked. I don't know for sure. But it certainly will help Alabama be a little more familiar with what otherwise would be an unfamiliar environment. And Alabama showed in Tampa on Sunday night, if there's a goal with a net and it's 10 feet tall, they can drop three-pointers into it from just about anywhere. I'm not saying that Alabama's going to beat Michigan. I'm not predicting that Alabama's going to shock the world. I didn't have it on my brackets. But I wouldn't be surprised if I were wrong. Not saying, just saying. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for me for today. I'm Kevin Skarbinski. This is Scarbo Knows. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate Brendan Martin steering the ship for the Sidelines.live network. Make sure you check out the show on YouTube. And if you do, go ahead and subscribe. Don't cost nothing. And make sure you check out our sponsor. If you have any financial services needs in the Birmingham area or really anywhere, you can reach out to the Rice family at Money Management Services. They've been helping people since 1992. They'll do a great job for you. Check them out next. I'm out of here. See ya.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family because when you walk through our doors,